So definitely an interesting story about the Misfit you mentioned, the Nintendo founder, and the story about Zelda. What I found interesting about your points, Adam, was the fact that you talk about familiarity. You use the point about princesses and the story of heroes and princesses. So some form of familiarity that people gravitate towards, but also to other important points, which is originality, how to package those and relaunch those, and value to the end audience. I think you made a very clear point on that. So the question is really, how much of a role does creativity play when we talk about advertising effectiveness? And what have we found out at Ipsos through this book that you've written?
Yeah, well, to give a very short answer, we have found clear evidence that creativity contributes to end advertising effects, and we've done that with a very generalizable, robust data set of thousands of ads. So that's just as a headline to say that we have found that evidence. Now, how did we find the evidence? I'll just explain briefly, and working with our analytics team, what we did was two very simple things. Firstly, we did a bottom-up, what we call a factor analysis, where we looked at all of our standard measures of the perception of the advertising experience. And we simply asked the software to group all of those individual specific perceptions together. And in doing so, we were able to observe three distinct groups of specific experiences. And to my mind, that was fascinating because it wasn't us as top down as practitioners saying, oh, this experience goes here, that one goes there. The software grouped them together because they naturally occur together as an experience from regular people of advertising. And what we then did with those three experiences, which I'll explain shortly, is we related to those experiences to our key advertising effects that we measure in our creative evaluation solutions and that are validated to end sales outcomes. So those were the two steps that we took in that analysis of thousands of ads, really broad spectrum of advertising performance across many countries, by the way. And the three experiences we identified were a creative experience, so the perception that the audience feel that the advertising is unique, that it's entertaining, that it's talkable. We also identified creative ideas, that conceptually the audience feel that the advertising has told them something new, that it's not necessarily about new information about a product, but maybe it's about new choices available to them, new lifestyles, new opportunities. And the third experience that we identified, we refer to as empathy and fitting in. And this isn't really about creativity as such, but it's a very important experience because it makes the audience, they believe that the advertising is very directed to them. It's about their world, their dreams, their challenges. And these three experiences together, we related, as I said, to the advertising effects. And what we identified is that those linked to creativity certainly have value in getting to end effects to grow brands.
Okay, Adam, that's great. So where does creativity play a role in advertising effects?
If we think about creative experiences, so that experience that is considered to be unique, entertaining, and talkable, that has a very strong relationship with one of our key effectiveness KPIs of memory encoding. So it's a very evidence-based measure where we ask regular people, having shown them advertising, amongst, by the way, other content and advertising, if they can remember it. And if they've proved to us from their memories that they can remember the advertising, we consider that to be an effect. And what we see is that creative experience, that belief that the advertising was entertaining, that it was unique, not something they've seen before, and it's something they would talk about, has a really strong relationship to that memory encoding effect metric that we have. And one example of an ad, and there are many that we could refer to, but one example that we reference in the book is for Heineken Green Bottle beer and their use of James Bond in this particular ad. The viewers of the video can see the ad, And what they will see is that it's a real blurred line between advertising and entertainment content, where we have Daniel Craig, he's on a holiday, and everyone thinks he's James Bond, and he's clearly not. He can't run fast enough, he doesn't have his tuxedo, and he's trying to find his passport. It's very enjoyable, very entertaining. It's something at least I haven't seen before, and the people that we measured the effects amongst who saw that ad also would agree that it was a unique, entertaining, and very talkable ad. So we see there again those parallels back to entertainment. We see clear evidence that if you have the mindset to not fit in and also consider the people you want to appeal to as an audience, and you need to deliver an experience to them, you'll be much more likely to be encoded in memory, which will give you that opportunity to get to end advertising effects.
So I love the Heineken example. It always reminds me of how confused I am when I say Daniel Craig or James Bond. And that's a great example of creative experiences, which you've explained quite nicely. But what about creative ideas? Could you go into that a little bit more in detail?
Yeah. Well, creative ideas, as a recap, is really about the experience of seeing something you haven't seen before. So something new, and connected to that, a consideration that the brand itself is different from others. And we see a really strong relationship between that experience, if it's delivered, and longer term market share gain potential of advertising. And I think that makes sense from what we observe in the data, that if you think again about us as people, we're pre-wired to choose the safe and familiar. So if advertising can have an opportunity to have a longer lasting effect over time and grow market share outside of a short-term sales cycle, then actually showing people new ideas and opportunities to jolt them out of their habitual behavior, to my mind, stands to reason that would fuel those longer term effects. And like with creative experiences, we profile a number of campaigns in the book, but one in particular that comes to my mind for creative ideas is from VF Corporation for Icebreaker. So in this particular ad, which is also, by the way, entertaining, but it does deliver the creative ideas experience very well. It really demonstrates the proposition that in terms of ski wear, you don't have to always choose plastic, that merino wool in this case is another option. So that advertising experience is less about icebreaker clothing front and center and talking about the qualities of the wool or the sourcing of it and information around it, and more generally, merino wool is an alternative choice. And of course, icebreaker can be that choice, or can fulfill that choice. So in short, it really is important in the longer term to deliver that experience, those creative ideas, things people haven't seen before, options they didn't realize they had. And if you do that, we see very clear evidence it can help fuel those advertising effects in the longer term.
So Adam, you've spoken about creative experiences and ideas. There was a third bucket you spoke about earlier, which was you referenced creative empathy and fitting in. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that particular, or the particular findings around that.
Empathy and fitting in, on face value, there really isn't anything that's creative about it. It's about the familiar. It's also, importantly, about the perception from the audience that advertising is for them. That it's less about the product and it's more about them, their challenges, their world, their dreams. And we see that has a clear influence in contributing to short-term advertising effects. Advertising effects on short-term choices in a period of, say, 4 to 6 weeks, rather than what I mentioned earlier in the longer term, and market share gains, which can be anything up to a year that you would see those effects. And again, I think based on what we've observed and we profile in the book around human nature, that we're pre-wired to favour the safe and familiar, it again somewhat makes sense because what you can do is use creativity, in this case in the short term, use creativity to deliver that experience. So something that's unique, entertaining and talkable, to open the gateways, if you will, of the mind and encode that ad in the mind. But then on the other hand, if you root it in the familiar, root it in the world of the target audience and their lives, their world, then we see very clear evidence that you will more often than not get strong short-term sales effects from your advertising. And one campaign that we profile in the book that comes to mind for me is for Volvo, the CX-60, if I remember well, the model. And I know auto advertising is one of your favourite sectors and passions, and perhaps we share it because let's be honest, there isn't much to like in auto advertising. It can be very stereotypical. It focuses on car features, zooming in on the features, heated seats, automatic window wipers, beautiful scenery, and encapsulating those features. But what we actually see in that sector, and why Volvo comes to mind for me, is that if you are rooting your creative, your advertising in empathy, in the world of the audience, in this case, new parents, so something you and I can probably relate to and empathize with, what we see in this ad is just a fantastic example, very unusual as well for the auto industry, to really focus on the lives of the people they want to appeal to. So we see the scenes of picking up the nappies at night, child-proofing your home, and of course at the end of that ad we see the Volvo car saving the life of the mother. And the car is always there. It's not just about the people. The car intermittently appears. It's always there. But the point is, it is an enabler of people's lives. It's not the central point and focus. And so I think in many respects, and I don't work at an ad agency, of course, but I think there is an art, a creative art, to use empathy and fitting in. But it is, in essence, not necessarily a creative experience for the audience. Again, though, it's critical to those short-term effects in what we see in the data.